April 18th, 1943. Dawn broke gray and reluctant over Henderson Field, Guadalcanal. The air hung thick with the scent of aviation fuel and wet earth, while mechanics in oil-stained coveralls made final adjustments to 16 Lockheed P-38 Lightning fighters. Their twin Allison V-1710 engines idled with a distinctive rumble that had become the soundtrack of American air power in the Pacific. Inside the cockpit of Lightning No. 41, Major John Mitchell adjusted his oxygen mask and studied the hand-drawn navigation chart strapped to his knee. The paper bore pencil marks and calculations that represented months of intelligence work, cryptographic analysis, and strategic planning. This was not another patrol or bomber escort mission. This was an assassination. The target was Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto, architect of Pearl Harbor, commander of the combined fleet, and perhaps the most strategically valuable enemy officer in the Pacific theater. American codebreakers had intercepted and decrypted Japanese communications revealing that Yamamoto would be flying from Rabaul to Bougainville that morning in a Mitsubishi G4M Betty bomber, accompanied by a single escort. The intelligence was precise. Departure time, route, destination. What it did not reveal was whether 16 American fighters and their pilots possessed the skill, courage, and luck necessary to intercept one man over 600 miles of hostile territory. The mission violated every conventional understanding of aerial warfare. Fighter pilots were trained to engage enemy fighters, escort bombers, and protect shipping. They were not trained to hunt admirals. Some officers at Pacific Fleet headquarters questioned whether targeting a specific individual crossed ethical boundaries that separated soldiers from assassins. Others argued that Yamamoto, as the operational commander responsible for Pearl Harbor, Midway, and countless other battles, represented a legitimate military target whose elimination could shorten the war and save American lives. The debate would continue long after the mission ended, but on that gray morning in April, 16 pilots prepared to transform intelligence into action. Behind the operation lay one of the war's most closely guarded secrets, Magic, the American cryptographic program that had broken Japanese naval codes. Since early 1942, teams of mathematicians, linguists, and intelligence analysts working in basement offices in Washington and Pearl Harbor had been reading Japanese military communications with increasing accuracy. The information they provided had contributed to victories at Coral Sea and Midway, but never before had it enabled such a surgically precise operation. When Japanese radio operators transmitted Yamamoto's flight schedule on April 13th, American cryptographers decoded it within hours. The message traveled from code-breaking facilities to Fleet Admiral Chester Nimitz, who personally authorized what would become known as Operation Vengeance. The technical challenges were immense. The interception point lay beyond the normal combat radius of any fighter in the American inventory except the P-38 Lightning. Even then, the mission required extended-range fuel tanks, precise navigation without radio communication, and split-second timing. The Lightning's twin-engine design provided redundancy and range, while its concentrated nose armament of one 20mm cannon and 450 caliber machine guns offered devastating firepower at close range. But mechanical reliability meant nothing without navigational accuracy, and navigational accuracy meant nothing without the element of surprise. Major Mitchell, the mission commander, had calculated flight times, fuel consumption, and wind patterns with the precision of an engineer and the intuition of a combat veteran. His navigation plan called for a circuitous route over water, flying barely 50 feet above the waves to avoid enemy radar installations on Japanese-held islands. The formation would maintain radio silence for over 2 hours, relying entirely on visual contact and dead reckoning navigation. One miscalculation, one mechanical failure, one moment of indecision could transform a surgical strike into a suicide mission. At Henderson Field, ground crews had worked through the night installing external fuel tanks, checking engine oil levels, and loading ammunition. Each Lightning carried over 1,000 rounds of 50 caliber ammunition and 60 rounds for the 20mm cannon. The external tanks held 165 gallons of high-octane aviation fuel, extending the aircraft's range to nearly 1,500 miles. But extended range meant added weight, and added weight meant reduced maneuverability. If Japanese fighters intercepted the formation before reaching the target area, the Americans would face enemy Zeros while carrying extra fuel tanks that transformed their aircraft into flying bombs. The irony was not lost on the intelligence community that had made the mission possible. Admiral Yamamoto, Japan's most capable naval strategist, had always emphasized the importance of communications security. Yet his own staff had grown complacent about radio procedures, believing their codes remained unbroken. Intelligence reports suggested that Japanese naval communications had become increasingly routine, with staff officers transmitting operational details that would have been unthinkable earlier in the war. Overconfidence, the same psychological flaw that had led Japan to attack Pearl Harbor, now threatened to cost them their most irreplaceable commander. As the Lightnings taxied toward the runway, Major Mitchell reviewed the tactical plan one final time. The formation would split into two elements as they approached Bougainville. Captain Thomas Lanfear and Lieutenant Rex Barber would lead the attack element, climbing to intercept Yamamoto's transportation, while the remaining aircraft provided top cover against enemy fighters. The entire engagement was expected to last less than 5 minutes, after which the Americans would begin an immediate withdrawal toward friendly territory. Success or failure would be determined not by prolonged combat, but by precise execution of a carefully rehearsed plan. The psychological dimension of the mission extended far beyond the 16 pilots climbing into their cockpits that morning. In Washington, Secretary of the Navy Frank Knox had personally briefed President Roosevelt on the operation's implications. Roosevelt, still haunted by the images of burning battleships at Pearl Harbor, had authorized the mission with a single comment: "Get Yamamoto." The president understood that successful assassination of Japan's most respected admiral would demonstrate American reach and resolve while potentially disrupting Japanese naval operations throughout the Pacific. At 0714 hours, the first Lightning lifted off from Henderson Field's Coral runway. One by one, the remaining fighters joined the formation, their twin engines clawing through humid air heavy with the promise of rain. Mitchell settled into a steady climb toward cruising altitude, watching his fuel flow indicators and engine temperatures while maintaining visual contact with his wingman. Behind him, Guadalcanal's green hills disappeared into morning haze, replaced by an endless expanse of blue-gray ocean dotted with coral atolls and the occasional merchant ship. The flight toward Bougainville would test every aspect of American aviation technology and pilot training developed since Pearl Harbor. The Lightning's complex twin-engine, twin-boom design required constant attention to engine synchronization, fuel management, and electrical systems. Unlike single-engine fighters, the P-38 demanded pilots think like engineers, monitoring multiple gauges and switches while navigating and maintaining formation discipline. But that same complexity provided capabilities no other fighter possessed. High-altitude performance, long range, and firepower concentrated in the aircraft's nose rather than spread across wing-mounted guns. Navigation over featureless ocean demanded dead reckoning techniques borrowed from naval aviation and merchant marine practice. Mitchell flew predetermined headings for calculated time intervals, adjusting for estimated wind drift and magnetic variation. His chart included checkpoints based on tiny islands and coral reefs, but cloud cover could obscure visual references, while navigation errors compounded with each passing mile. The formation maintained tight discipline, with wingmen focusing on position keeping while flight leaders concentrated on navigation and fuel management. Radio silence imposed an additional burden on formation flying over hostile territory. Pilots communicated through hand signals and aircraft positioning, relying on visual contact to maintain cohesion. Engine problems, navigation questions, and tactical updates could not be transmitted without breaking radio silence and potentially alerting Japanese listening posts. Each pilot flew alone with his thoughts, trusting his commander's navigation while watching fuel gauges slowly approach critical levels. The first hour passed without incident. The Lightning formation flew southeastward over water so blue it seemed artificial under the tropical sun. Engine temperatures remained within normal limits, despite the burden of external fuel tanks, while oil pressure gauges showed steady readings that indicated reliable mechanical performance. Mitchell checked his navigation plot every few minutes, comparing elapsed time with distance covered and fuel consumed. So far, the calculations matched reality, but the most challenging portion of the flight remained ahead. At 0830 hours, the formation began encountering weather systems moving northward from the Solomon Sea. Towering cumulus clouds forced Mitchell to choose between climbing to higher altitude, which would increase fuel consumption, or maintaining low altitude through areas of turbulence and reduced visibility. He chose to climb, trading fuel efficiency for tactical flexibility while keeping the formation together in increasingly choppy air. The decision would prove crucial during the engagement ahead, though Mitchell could not know that as he watched altimeter needles steady at 8,000 feet. Japanese weather reconnaissance aircraft reported similar cloud formations over Bougainville that morning, but their intelligence staffs focused on implications for bomber operations rather than fighter interceptions. Admiral Yamamoto's transportation schedule had not been modified despite deteriorating weather conditions, reflecting confidence in Japanese-controlled airspace over the Northern Solomons. That confidence was about to be tested by 16 American fighters carrying enough ammunition to destroy a small airbase and enough determination to pursue their target into the heart of Japanese territory. The psychological burden of the mission weighed differently on each pilot. Some focused on technical details of navigation and fuel management, treating the flight as an extended-range patrol with unusual objectives. Others contemplated the moral implications of targeted assassination, wondering whether hunting a specific individual violated ethical codes that distinguished soldiers from murderers. Most simply concentrated on immediate tasks, maintaining formation, monitoring instruments, and preparing for combat against enemy fighters, whose capabilities had been demonstrated repeatedly throughout the Pacific campaign. Captain Lanfear, designated leader of the attack element, reviewed his approach profile as the formation neared the interception area. Intelligence reports indicated Yamamoto's Betty bomber would be flying at approximately 4,500 feet, escorted by 6 Zero fighters. The American plan called for Lanfear and Barber to dive from altitude, engaging the transport aircraft while remaining Lightnings engaged escort fighters. Success required precise timing, aggressive tactics, and immediate withdrawal before additional Japanese fighters could respond. But plans developed in briefing rooms often collapsed during the chaos of aerial combat. Weather conditions, navigation errors, mechanical failures, or tactical surprises could transform carefully rehearsed operations into desperate improvisations. The Pacific War had already demonstrated that combat success depended as much on adaptability and luck as on preparation and skill. Major Mitchell understood that his 16 pilots were about to test those principles against one of the most heavily defended areas in the Japanese Pacific perimeter. As the formation approached Bougainville's coast, Mitchell signaled for the external fuel tanks to be jettisoned. One by one, the metal tanks tumbled toward the ocean below, their departure marked by subtle changes in aircraft handling characteristics as the Lightnings shed excess weight and regained their designed maneuverability. Engine power increased as throttles advanced toward combat settings, while pilots checked gun switches and reviewed target identification procedures. The hunting phase of Operation Vengeance was about to begin. At 0934 hours, lookouts aboard American submarines reported Japanese air activity over Bougainville, consistent with scheduled transportation flights. The intelligence had been accurate. Yamamoto was airborne and following his predicted route. But intelligence reports could not account for last-minute schedule changes, additional escort aircraft, or mechanical problems that might alter Japanese flight plans. The success of Operation Vengeance now depended entirely on the skill and determination of 16 American fighter pilots approaching enemy territory at 300 miles per hour. The irony of the situation would have appealed to Admiral Yamamoto himself, had he known American fighters were approaching his location. The architect of Pearl Harbor had always emphasized the importance of intelligence, surprise, and concentrated force. His own transportation that morning violated every principle he had taught: predictable scheduling, routine communications, and inadequate escort protection. The admiral who had planned the most successful surprise attack in naval history was about to become victim of an equally surprising operation planned with equal precision. Major Mitchell spotted the Japanese formation at 0943 hours. 2 aircraft flying in loose formation approximately 15 miles ahead, maintaining steady course and altitude exactly as intelligence reports had predicted. The larger aircraft matched the silhouette of a Mitsubishi G4M Betty bomber, while 6 smaller aircraft surrounding it appeared to be Mitsubishi A6M Zero fighters. Mitchell keyed his microphone once, breaking radio silence for the first time in over 2 hours with a single transmission. Bogies, 11 o'clock, go get them. The formation split with practiced precision. Lanfear and Barber dove toward the bomber while remaining aircraft climbed to engage escort fighters. What followed lasted less than 3 minutes, but would influence Pacific strategy for the remainder of the war. The Lightning's concentrated firepower proved devastatingly effective against the lightly protected transport aircraft, while superior American tactics and equipment overcame numerical disadvantage against the escort fighters. When the engagement ended, Admiral Yamamoto's bomber was falling toward the jungle below in flames, taking with it Japan's most irreplaceable naval commander. The return flight to Henderson Field tested pilot endurance and aircraft reliability to their limits. Fuel gauges showed dangerously low readings as the formation flew northwestward over 600 miles of hostile territory, while battle damage from the engagement reduced performance on several aircraft. But the Allison engines continued running smoothly, despite extended operation at high power settings, and the Lightning's rugged construction absorbed combat damage that would have destroyed lighter fighters. Major Mitchell brought his formation home with all aircraft intact, achieving complete tactical success with 0 losses. News of Yamamoto's death reached Japanese naval headquarters within hours of the engagement, creating confusion and dismay throughout the combined fleet command structure. The admiral's loss represented more than the death of a skilled strategist. It symbolized American capability to strike Japanese leadership anywhere in the Pacific theater. Japanese radio communications, previously confident and routine, became cautious and cryptic as staff officers realized their codes might have been compromised. The psychological impact on Japanese naval operations proved as significant as the strategic implications. Yamamoto's replacement, Admiral Minichi Koga, lacked his predecessor's combat experience and strategic vision. More importantly, the circumstances of Yamamoto's death forced Japanese commanders to reconsider fundamental assumptions about communication security, transportation safety, and American intelligence capabilities. The Pacific War's momentum, already shifting toward American advantage after Midway and Guadalcanal, accelerated as Japanese leadership struggled to adapt to new realities of global conflict. American intelligence analysts studying Japanese communications intercepts noted immediate changes in enemy operational patterns following Yamamoto's death. Flight schedules became irregular, radio procedures grew more sophisticated, and senior commanders traveled with increased security escorts. The success of Operation Vengeance had achieved more than eliminating a strategic opponent. It had introduced uncertainty and caution into Japanese decision-making processes that had previously operated with confidence and predictability. The ethical debates surrounding targeted assassination continued throughout the war and beyond. Some naval historians argued that Yamamoto, as a uniformed military commander conducting legitimate operations, represented a lawful target under international law. Others questioned whether the precise nature of the operation crossed boundaries between warfare and murder. Admiral Halsey, commanding American naval forces in the South Pacific, settled the debate with characteristic directness. What's so wrong about killing the bastard who killed so many American boys at Pearl Harbor? The technical success of Operation Vengeance demonstrated integration between intelligence gathering, strategic planning, and tactical execution that became characteristic of American military operations throughout the war. The ability to intercept and decode enemy communications, plan complex operations based on intelligence analysis, and execute those operations with precision and reliability represented advantages that Japanese forces could not match. The assassination of Admiral Yamamoto proved that American industrial capacity could produce not only ships and aircraft in unprecedented quantities, but also the sophisticated intelligence systems necessary to employ them effectively. Major Mitchell and his pilots returned to routine operations within days of the mission, but the strategic implications of their success continued expanding throughout the Pacific theater. Japanese naval operations became more cautious and defensive, while American commanders gained confidence in their ability to plan and execute complex operations over vast distances. The loss of Admiral Yamamoto marked not just the death of Japan's most capable naval strategist, but the beginning of a new phase in Pacific warfare, characterized by American technological and tactical superiority. The intelligence breakthrough that made Operation Vengeance possible demonstrated the growing importance of cryptographic warfare in modern military operations. Code-breaking organizations expanded throughout the war, employing thousands of mathematicians, linguists, and analysts whose work remained classified for decades after the conflict ended. The success of MAGIC and similar programs proved that information could be as valuable as ammunition in determining strategic outcomes. The Lockheed P-38 Lightning fighters that carried out the mission represented the culmination of American aviation engineering developed during the war's early years. The aircraft's twin-engine design provided reliability and range unmatched by single-engine fighters, while its concentrated armament offered firepower previously available only in bomber aircraft. But technical superiority meant nothing without skilled pilots capable of employing that technology effectively under combat conditions. The men who flew Operation Vengeance embodied qualities that characterized American military aviation throughout the Pacific War: technical proficiency, tactical flexibility, and determination to succeed despite overwhelming odds. They had trained in peacetime flying clubs and civilian flight schools, learned advanced techniques in military training programs, and gained combat experience over hostile territory where mistakes meant death. Their success against Admiral Yamamoto demonstrated that democracy could produce warriors capable of matching any threat posed by totalitarian adversaries. The strategic consequences of Yamamoto's death extended beyond immediate tactical advantages. Japanese naval planning became more conservative and predictable, while American commanders gained freedom to pursue increasingly aggressive operations throughout the Pacific theater. The psychological impact on both sides proved as significant as material losses, demonstrating that carefully planned operations could achieve strategic results far beyond their immediate tactical scope. Admiral Nimitz, commenting on Operation Vengeance years after the war, observed that killing Yamamoto had been less important than proving American capability to hunt enemy commanders anywhere in the Pacific Ocean. The mission demonstrated integration between intelligence gathering, operational planning, and tactical execution that became the foundation for American military success throughout the remainder of the war. The bomber crews, naval personnel, and support staff who made Operation Vengeance possible represented thousands of Americans whose contributions remained largely invisible, but absolutely essential. Intelligence analysts working in basement offices, mechanics servicing aircraft engines, radio operators monitoring Japanese communications, and logistics personnel managing fuel supplies all played crucial roles in the mission's success. Their combined efforts transformed strategic intelligence into tactical action with a precision that Japanese commanders found impossible to counter. The death of Admiral Yamamoto marked a turning point in Pacific warfare that extended far beyond the loss of a single enemy commander. It demonstrated American determination to pursue Japanese leadership wherever they might attempt to hide, while proving that technological superiority and strategic planning could overcome defensive advantages that had previously seemed insurmountable. The mission's success established precedents for special operations that continued influencing military planning decades after the war ended. As news of Yamamoto's death spread throughout the Pacific theater, American morale received a boost that proved as valuable as any tactical victory. The architect of Pearl Harbor had been hunted down and killed by American fighters operating deep in enemy territory, demonstrating that no Japanese commander remained safe from American reach. The psychological value of that demonstration contributed to growing American confidence and declining Japanese morale that characterized the war's final phases. The technical challenges overcome during Operation Vengeance illustrated broader themes that defined American military success throughout World War II. Industrial capacity to produce superior equipment, educational systems that produced skilled personnel, and organizational structures that could integrate complex operations across vast distances. The mission's success resulted from contributions by thousands of individuals whose combined efforts created capabilities that no individual nation could match. The legacy of Operation Vengeance extended beyond World War II into subsequent conflicts, where intelligence gathering, precision planning, and special operations proved decisive factors in strategic success. The principles demonstrated during the hunt for Admiral Yamamoto influenced military doctrine, intelligence procedures, and tactical development that shaped American defense capabilities for generations. Major Mitchell later reflected that Operation Vengeance succeeded because 16 pilots had been willing to fly an impossible mission based on intelligence that seemed too precise to be credible. Their faith in American industrial capacity, strategic planning, and tactical execution had been rewarded with complete success against insurmountable odds. But the ultimate measure of their achievement lay not in personal recognition or tactical victory, but in strategic consequences that hastened the war's end and saved countless American lives. The morning of April 18, 1943, had begun with 16 American fighters departing Henderson Field on what many considered a suicide mission. It ended with the death of Japan's most irreplaceable naval commander and demonstration of American capabilities that Japanese forces could neither predict nor prevent. The success of Operation Vengeance proved that information, properly employed, could be as lethal as any weapon in the American arsenal. The men who carried out the mission returned to routine operations, but their achievement resonated throughout the Pacific War and beyond. They had proven that courage, skill, and determination could transform strategic intelligence into tactical success when supported by superior technology and organizational excellence. Their legacy reminds us that freedom's defense requires not only heroic individuals willing to risk everything for victory, but also industrial societies capable of producing the tools and systems those individuals need to succeed. In remembering Admiral Yamamoto's death and the pilots who accomplished it, we honor both the tactical brilliance that made Operation Vengeance possible and the strategic vision that understood its importance. The mission demonstrated that democratic societies, when threatened, could produce warriors and weapons capable of matching any challenge posed by totalitarian adversaries. That lesson remains as relevant today as it was during those desperate early years of World War II. How many strategic operations throughout history have hinged on a single moment of decision, a handful of brave individuals, and the industrial might to support them? Operation Vengeance reminds us that victory in modern warfare requires not just individual heroism, but the collective efforts of entire nations dedicated to freedom's preservation. If this story of courage, precision, and strategic brilliance moved you, please subscribe to honor those who gave their lives to preserve the memory of such remarkable achievements. Share this video with others who appreciate the intersection of human valor and technological mastery that defined America's finest hour. These stories deserve to be told, remembered, and passed on to future generations who will face their own moments of testing. In the quiet moments that followed the return to Henderson Field, each pilot processed what they had accomplished in their own way. Lieutenant Rex Barber, whose guns had fired the fatal rounds into Yamamoto's Betty, found himself strangely conflicted. The satisfaction of a mission perfectly executed warred with an unexpected melancholy that accompanied the deliberate killing of a single, identified individual. Combat had always been abstract, shooting at aircraft rather than people, engaging formations rather than faces. But Operation Vengeance had personalized warfare in ways that troubled some of the participants for years to come. The immediate aftermath brought practical concerns that overshadowed philosophical questions. Intelligence officers debriefed each pilot separately, documenting every detail of the engagement from multiple perspectives. The information would be analyzed, compared with intercepted Japanese communications, and used to plan future operations. But the debriefing process also served another purpose: ensuring that all participants understood the classified nature of the mission and the critical importance of maintaining absolute secrecy about American code-breaking capabilities. What the pilots could not know that April morning was how their success would reverberate through Japanese command structures over the following months. Admiral Koga, Yamamoto's successor, proved competent but uninspired, lacking the strategic brilliance and intuitive understanding of naval aviation that had made his predecessor so dangerous. More significantly, the circumstances of Yamamoto's death created paranoia within Japanese high command that degraded decision-making efficiency throughout the remaining years of war. The strategic implications extended beyond command effectiveness to fundamental questions about Japanese operational security. If American forces could intercept and decode communications with sufficient precision to schedule assassination missions, what other Japanese plans had been compromised? The realization that their most sensitive communications might be transparent to enemy intelligence forced dramatic changes in Japanese planning procedures that proved costly and inefficient. Military historians studying the Pacific War's later phases identified specific operational changes that resulted directly from Operation Vengeance. Japanese naval formations began employing more complex routing procedures. Communications became heavily encrypted at multiple levels, and command personnel traveled with security arrangements that absorbed resources previously allocated to combat operations. These defensive measures provided better protection for individual commanders, but they also introduced delays and inefficiencies that hindered Japanese strategic responsiveness. The psychological impact on Japanese naval aviators proved particularly significant. Yamamoto had been revered throughout the combined fleet as a leader who understood aviation warfare better than any admiral in either navy. His death suggested that American aviation technology and tactics had evolved beyond Japanese capabilities, a realization that undermined confidence among pilots who had previously considered themselves superior to any opposition they might encounter in Pacific skies. American aviation units throughout the Pacific theater reported improved performance and morale following news of Operation Vengeance. The mission demonstrated that American industrial capacity could produce aircraft capable of extraordinary mission profiles, while American intelligence systems could identify and track enemy leadership with unprecedented precision. Fighter pilots, who had previously operated within carefully defined tactical limitations, began proposing more aggressive operations against targets deep within Japanese-controlled territory. The 16 P-38 Lightnings that accomplished Operation Vengeance represented more than successful aircraft design. They embodied American industrial philosophy that emphasized complexity and capability over simplicity and cost. Each Lightning cost approximately $100,000 to produce, compared with $25,000 for a Japanese Zero fighter. But that investment in sophisticated technology provided capabilities that proved decisive when employed by skilled pilots against carefully selected targets. Lockheed engineers studying combat reports from Operation Vengeance made detailed notes about Lightning performance under extended range conditions. The aircraft had operated at maximum gross weight for over 4 hours, including high-power combat operations, without mechanical failures that might have compromised mission success. This reliability under extreme conditions validated design decisions made years earlier when the Lightning was still experimental aircraft, whose capabilities existed only in wind tunnels and engineering calculations. The mission also demonstrated the crucial importance of pilot training programs that had evolved throughout America's entry into the Pacific War. Mitchell, Lanphier, Barber, and their colleagues possessed flying skills developed through thousands of hours of peacetime training, supplemented by combat experience gained over Guadalcanal and surrounding battle zones. Professional competence could not be improvised or accelerated. It required systematic development over months and years, supported by training resources that represented enormous investments in personnel and equipment. Admiral Halsey, reviewing Operation Vengeance from his flagship perspective, recognized that the mission represented a new type of warfare where intelligence capabilities could be transformed directly into tactical action. Previous naval operations had employed intelligence primarily for defensive purposes, avoiding enemy concentrations, protecting friendly shipping, positioning forces advantageously for anticipated engagements. But Operation Vengeance proved that intelligence could become offensive weapons systems when integrated with appropriate delivery platforms and tactical procedures. The success of American cryptographic operations against Japanese naval codes created strategic advantages that extended far beyond single missions like Operation Vengeance. American submarine commanders operating throughout Japanese shipping lanes received daily updates on enemy vessel movements, allowing them to position their boats for maximum effectiveness while avoiding enemy patrols. Surface task forces received advance warning of Japanese naval operations, enabling them to concentrate superior forces at decisive points while avoiding unfavorable engagements. But perhaps the most significant long-term consequence of Yamamoto's death was its demonstration of American technological and organizational maturity. The United States had entered World War II as a peaceful democracy with limited military capabilities and no recent experience with large-scale warfare. Less than 2 years later, American forces were conducting precision operations across 6,000 miles of hostile territory, employing sophisticated intelligence systems and advanced aircraft operated by highly trained personnel. This transformation represented unprecedented mobilization of democratic societies' resources for military purposes. The German High Command, studying reports of Operation Vengeance through their own intelligence networks, recognized implications that extended beyond the Pacific theater. If American forces could plan and execute such precise operations against Japanese leadership, similar techniques might soon be employed against German commanders operating throughout Europe and North Africa. This realization contributed to increasingly elaborate security measures that absorbed German resources while introducing delays into command procedures. Soviet intelligence services, nominally allied with American forces but intensely competitive about technological capabilities, attempted to reconstruct Operation Vengeance from fragmentary information available through diplomatic channels. Their analysis focused particularly on American cryptographic capabilities, seeking to understand techniques that might later be employed against Soviet communications. The competitive aspects of the wartime alliance were already beginning to emerge, presaging Cold War tensions that would dominate post-war international relations. Within the American defense establishment, Operation Vengeance became a case study examined by intelligence officers, operational planners, and military educators, seeking to understand principles that could be applied to future missions. The operation demonstrated integration between technical intelligence gathering, strategic analysis, operational planning, and tactical execution that became the foundation for American special operations doctrine throughout the Cold War and beyond. The individual aircraft that participated in Operation Vengeance continued flying combat missions throughout the Pacific War, accumulating thousands of additional flight hours while their pilots gained experience that would prove invaluable during subsequent engagements. Several of the Lightnings survived the war intact, eventually returning to the United States where they were studied by engineers seeking to understand how combat operations affected aircraft systems and structural integrity. Major Mitchell's navigation techniques, proven successful during the flight to Bougainville, became standard procedures taught at American navigation schools throughout the remaining years of war. His methods for dead reckoning over featureless ocean, fuel management during extended-range operations, and formation flying under radio silence conditions were incorporated into training syllabi used to prepare pilots for similar missions throughout the Pacific theater. The external fuel tanks jettisoned during Operation Vengeance represented another technological achievement that enabled American aviation to operate at ranges previously considered impossible. These disposable tanks, manufactured by the thousands in American factories, extended fighter aircraft range while preserving maneuverability during combat. Similar technologies would later enable American strategic bombing operations against Japanese home islands and provide tactical flexibility that Japanese forces could not match. Intelligence analysts working in basement offices at Pearl Harbor and Washington continued monitoring Japanese communications for reactions to Yamamoto's death. They documented changes in Japanese operational procedures, command relationships, and strategic planning that provided additional evidence of the mission's strategic impact. This analysis contributed to assessments of enemy morale, leadership effectiveness, and probable future operations that influenced American strategic planning throughout the Pacific War. The secrecy surrounding Operation Vengeance created challenges that persisted long after the war ended. Participants were forbidden from discussing details of the mission for decades, while official histories omitted references to the intelligence breakthroughs that had made the operation possible. This classification policy protected ongoing cryptographic operations, but also prevented public recognition of achievements that represented some of the war's most significant strategic successes. Admiral Yamamoto's personal effects, recovered from the wreckage of his Betty bomber by Japanese search teams, included operational plans for defensive operations throughout the Solomon Islands and New Guinea. These documents, captured by advancing American forces several months later, provided additional evidence of the strategic confusion that followed the admiral's death. His replacement had modified several key operational concepts in ways that proved less effective than Yamamoto's original planning. The jungle that concealed Yamamoto's crashed aircraft became a pilgrimage site for Japanese naval personnel serving in the area, though such visits were discouraged by current operational commanders who recognized that predictable behavior patterns created opportunities for American intelligence gathering. This symbolic importance reflected the admiral's status within Japanese naval culture, where individual leadership was valued more highly than systematic organizational excellence. American war correspondents, gradually learning details about Operation Vengeance through unofficial channels, petitioned military censors for permission to report the story as evidence of American capability and determination. These requests were denied consistently throughout the war, reflecting concerns about protecting intelligence sources and methods that remained active against Japanese communications. The full story would not be revealed until decades after the war's end, when declassification procedures finally permitted public discussion of wartime cryptographic achievements. The P-38 Lightning's performance during Operation Vengeance contributed to its selection for numerous subsequent long-range missions throughout the Pacific Theater. The aircraft's twin-engine reliability and extended range capabilities made it ideal for reconnaissance flights, bomber escort missions, and strike operations against targets beyond the reach of single-engine fighters. Production rates increased throughout 1943, as military planners recognized the Lightning's unique capabilities. Lieutenant Colonel Charles Lindbergh, serving as a civilian technical advisor in the Pacific Theater, studied Operation Vengeance as an example of how advanced navigation techniques could extend military aviation capabilities. His recommendations for improved fuel management, route planning, and pilot training reflected lessons learned from the mission's success. These contributions helped standardize procedures that enabled similar operations throughout the war's remaining years. The weather conditions encountered during Operation Vengeance highlighted the importance of meteorological support for extended-range operations. American weather services in the Pacific expanded significantly throughout 1943, employing trained meteorologists, sophisticated forecasting equipment, and systematic observation networks that provided operational planners with information necessary for mission planning. These capabilities represented another aspect of American industrial and technical superiority that Japanese forces could not match. Radio silence procedures, proven effective during the flight to Bougainville, became standard practice for American aviation units conducting operations over hostile territory. Pilots were trained in visual communication techniques, formation flying without radio coordination, and emergency procedures that could be executed without breaking communications security. These skills proved invaluable during numerous subsequent missions, where surprise depended on avoiding electronic detection. The success of Operation Vengeance encouraged American strategic planners to consider similar operations against other high-value Japanese targets. Intelligence organizations expanded their monitoring of enemy leadership movements, transportation schedules, and communications patterns, seeking opportunities for precision strikes that could achieve strategic results with minimal resource expenditure. Several such operations were planned and executed throughout the war's remaining years, though none achieved the symbolic significance of Yamamoto's assassination. Military training programs throughout the United States incorporated lessons learned from Operation Vengeance into curricula, designed to prepare pilots, navigators, and intelligence officers for similar missions. Case studies examined every aspect of the operation, from initial intelligence gathering through tactical execution and strategic assessment. These educational programs ensured that successful techniques would be preserved and transmitted to new generations of military personnel. The industrial capacity that produced the aircraft, fuel, ammunition, and equipment necessary for Operation Vengeance represented one of World War II's most remarkable achievements. American factories, many of which had been producing civilian goods just 2 years earlier, were manufacturing military hardware with precision and efficiency that surpassed anything achieved by totalitarian adversaries. This productive capability provided American military forces with technological advantages that proved decisive throughout the global conflict. Admiral Yamamoto's death represented more than the elimination of a skilled enemy commander. It symbolized America's transformation from peaceful democracy to global military power, capable of projecting force anywhere in the world. The institutional capabilities demonstrated by Operation Vengeance, intelligence gathering, strategic planning, technological development, industrial production, and tactical execution, became the foundation for American leadership throughout the Cold War and beyond. In the final analysis, Operation Vengeance succeeded because it integrated individual courage with organizational excellence, technological superiority with strategic vision, and tactical precision with moral purpose. These combinations represented the best qualities of democratic societies mobilized for warfare against totalitarian adversaries. The mission's legacy reminds us that freedom's defense requires not only brave individuals willing to risk everything for victory, but also institutional capabilities that can transform courage into strategic success. The story of those 16 Lightning fighters departing Henderson Field on that gray morning in April 1943 continues inspiring military professionals, aviation enthusiasts, and students of strategic history. Operation Vengeance demonstrated that democratic societies, when threatened, could mobilize resources and develop capabilities that surpassed anything achieved by their adversaries. That lesson remains as relevant today as it was during the desperate early years of World War II, when the outcome of global conflict hung in the balance and individual acts of courage could change the course of history.